Acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we're joining this conversation. We pay our respects to elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today.
We are working on seeding the third horizon. And there's a lot of trepidation. And then when we come into, there is kind of like an investment committee. We don't call it that, but we fall back off very often into Horizon 1 talking like, well, do we want to invest in this because, the cash flow looks really bad. And then it's like, you need to have some of that conversation. But at the end of the day, it's still moored around, is this a model we want to support?
Yeah.
Even if we think the business is, I don't know, it's kind of a gamble. There are so many other forms of capital. This was part of the introduction that we miss because actually in the global north, or otherwise known as the weird, Western educated, industrialized, rich and developed countries are so focused on the one form of financial capital and also doing good with that one form of capital, which is financial, that they neglect. It's like a muscle. I'm so good with my right hand that I don't really use my left hand, right? It becomes weak because you don't use it. And actually, now is the time for more holistic development.
Welcome to the Water Talks. I'm in Melbourne, Black Rock, Bunurong country, and I want to welcome Cindy Ko from Paris, who lives in Singapore, who seems to be an intrepid traveller. My friend, Cindy Ko.
Hi, Christine. Nice to be here with you. I'm actually in the south, near Nice.
Oh my gosh. So we're not actually having a cold snap, but it's cold. It's cold here in Melbourne, which is, thus the scarf
Yes.
and thus you in the singlet. So I know Cindy from studying at the Small Giants Academy and completing an MBE with her. And she's been my friend now for a year and a bit. And we want to welcome her to the Water Talks. And I'd like to, if I may, Cindy, introduce you. But before I introduce Cindy, I just want to say that we are podcasting from each other's homes. Well, no, I'm at my home, she's in hers. And so there will be a little bit of noise and perhaps a little bit of distraction, but I think we can cope with it. We've lived through COVID, so we're all good. So Cindy spent her career across the full spectrum of capital, from investment banking to microfinance, venture capital to impact investing, or so she thought. With time and a little more life experience, she came to see that there are many other forms of capital, often more important than financial. She's slowly but surely working to close that early gap in understanding, practicing a more relational way of being and working, and cultivating ways of knowing beyond the intellectual. Cindy credits her father as her teacher and lifelong inspiration for seeking a more compassionate and values-aligned life. Cindy is deeply curious about systems change and regenerative design. Through Imaginal Seeds, she's exploring what it means to invest for a more regenerative future, attending not only to what is being invested in, but to how decisions are made and how power is distributed. In her spare time, Cindy enjoys yoga, tennis, and practicing non-violent communication with her husband and daughter, not always successfully. And in an alternate life, she would be the female David Attenborough, intrepid explorer, dedicated environmentalist, and charismatic interlocutor between nature and humanity. And I don't know where she finds the time to do all of those things.
It's aspirational.
Yeah. So welcome. And I want to talk to our listeners about why this is an important conversation. And the conversation is important because what we want to know is, where do you think money goes when it grows a conscience? And this conversation is really about what it actually takes to move money from extraction to regeneration, not in theory, but from inside the rooms where those decisions get made. So, Cindy, the question that I'd really love to start with is, given that you have sat in the rooms where very wealthy people are trying to do good, what do those conversations actually sound like?
Um, Thanks, Christine. I think um, it's going to sound very familiar to what might go on in our own heads. I think the fundamental question that runs through um, everybody when they want to do good, but there is something that holds them back is really the question of how much is enough. Um,
Mm,
and that question seems to be more maybe applicable to people who have more financial resources, but I actually think it's applicable to all of us,
yeah.
all of us that live in this system. And so um, I want to say that's the most fundamental question. Everything else is like about taking action, executing, but often that step you never arrive at that step because of um, yeah, the really core underlying, very emotional and embodied feeling of like insecurity. And so that's actually a question that's very personal to me too, because I'm also trying to live to up to my ideals, and I feel it every day, like the pull, right?
The push and pull. It's interesting, isn't it? Because in order for us to move forward, there's got to be momentum and there's got to be inspired momentum almost.
Mm,
But it requires self-reflection.
yes, yeah,
And that self-reflection, that's the hard I think that's the hard thing, the hard bit.
self-reflection, and I want to use like a word that gets used a lot in church, faith,
Ah,
because it is really like a in some ways, I wouldn't even call it trust. It's more of a hope in
yeah.
things that are not proven. So there is a lot of doubt mixed in there. You are like, I hope I am doing the right thing, you know? You try to live to your ideals, and then it's really you're clinging on to hope with a full awareness that you are not sure. Yeah. Like, especially when all around you, they're like, oh, that sounds really idealistic and unmoored to reality, when you try to um yeah, live out your ideals. And so there is it also makes me think of the three horizons framework,
Yeah.
which we can talk to later. Or
Yeah, no, bring it up now. Let's talk about the 3 horizons now because
yeah,
I think that's pivotal in what we're talking about.
yeah. Well, I came across that framework actually through Small Giants. So I'm very
Mm,
grateful. And it has been such a helpful framework in um, thinking through both impact investments as well as like where you where you wanna place your own life. And so the Three Horizons framework was I think it was, like, coined by someone named Bill Sharp, and I believe he was a consultant, but, okay, we'll
some of them are
s
good.
skim over
Consultants
those
are great.
details. What's
Yeah,
that?
I said
Yeah,
nothing wrong with a good consultant.
and, essentially, you could use it almost in any context, like, you could use it in a business context. The first horizon is the current context in which we live. And that's the current system. The third horizon is essentially that more beautiful future our hearts know is possible, but has not
Mm,
yet materialized.
mm,
And then horizon two would be that bridge. Um, and so often, if you're aiming for horizon three, but you're not connected in any way in some way to horizon two or horizon one, you seem like too much of an idealist. Um, But I believe you still need those visionaries out there, but a lot of people, I guess, um, yeah, that's not where the majority sit. And then in Horizon 1, you might still be attempting to live out your ideals, but you feel like the current system, maybe does not need to change, and you're okay in that system. So the way it's been explained, when we took the course was like Horizon 1, you might be doing triage. You're trying to make the system more efficient, work better, but you're not fundamentally actually changing anything in the system. And and then anything beyond that would be where you're actually trying to work on systems change.
So the combination of regenerative finance and system change are clearly interwoven,
Mm,
and it's kind of a critical reality to be willing to embrace that as a concept, do you think, in order for it to be momentum and momentous change? So, in other words, I'm going to invest. I want to invest. I've got a certain percentage of money that I want to invest. Have I come to a point where I'm comfortable in knowing that there's a long term investment, which means that I'm prepared to embrace Horizon 3 too, in terms of any, because I come from a really traditional investment background.
mm,
I'm used to looking at return on investment in a very traditional way.
right.
So, so I've had a change of heart. I've met somebody like you who is able to talk to me about different ways in which I can look at these things, because we can't rely just on people who already understand this. The opportunity for us to make change is to actually bring more people into this way of being, this understanding of things. Yes.
Um, yeah, I feel like we can go in like, you know, a dozen different directions with this. Um, I think, you know, some people disagree about this point, but I think fundamentally for me, then my opinion is when you still seek a return on investment, it's very hard to unstick yourself from Horizon 1. And the reason being is that Horizon 1 is where you have product market fit, right?
Hmm.
Because your whatever product you have, it is suited to the current environment. Whereas Horizon 3 is where you're trying to actually change the system. Now, where sometimes we disagree is people might say like, oh, when Tesla first came out, that was Horizon 3, where it was completely changing the system. Electric cars, that was not popular at the time, and you're switching. But very quickly, you might argue, okay, maybe that was Horizon 3. Very quickly, it has become Horizon 1.
Yeah.
And I would argue if you are still rooted in the need for a financial return, I mean, I'm gonna say some things that are gonna be, I feel like, very unpopular. It'll
Oh, and we hope so, because I think the opportunity for us to have a discussion, and that's the reason that pollination was ever invented, was so that we could have conversations that were not always 100% what everybody thinks. Well, we've got Cindy's frozen just a bit. Hopefully, she'll be back to us in a minute. I'll continue to have a little chat, which will, oh, there you are, you're back. She's back. Oh,
Yes,
you're there.
I tried to stay
Um,
still, so
no, 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 perfectly fine. So I think that it's good to have this conversation, and I think that the conversation that takes us into a space that is not always everyone's comfort zone is exactly where we need to be.
yeah. I mean, because, well, picking up from where around, like, return on investment, um,
Yeah,
I think that's the story of more, where we talked about it, right? Like, how much is enough? And, um at some point, let's just say we're not gonna talk about everybody. There are people who need more. Yeah. But really
oh,
the
and that's a
question,
whole other conversation, huh?
yeah, it is a whole, and it's complex. So, I mean, obviously I'm making sweeping generalities, but, um, the need for return on investment, especially with, um, I guess, say, high net worth individuals with whom I've worked a lot, and very impactful and philanthropic minded people.
Yep.
But still, that need for more is what I think is fueling our current Horizon 1, our economic system, which I think at least you and I are on that same page of like, how do we fundamentally shift that? Um, And, we're both followers of Nate Hagen's Great Simplification.
Yeah.
Um, and he explained really, really clearly and convincingly how basically GDP is in lockstep with energy and materials. and
Yeah.
fossil fuel counts for about 80% of that energy. So it's like if people talk about carbon emissions, but also about growing the economy, I mean, that is the fundamental paradox, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah, and
and
it's
that's
a
what return
plurality
on
that we don't.
investment is. Yeah.
And the holding of that is a really interesting thing because, well, it's interesting actually. Again, you're right. We could go so many different ways with this. We could go into human behavior. We could look at people's fears. We could look at fear of change. There's so much.
Yeah.
Um, and an overarching reality I think that we live in, which is this horizon one space, which which says A, I don't trust anybody or anything. So I'm not going to believe anything that anybody else tells me because at the moment I'm going to close my shutters and I'm going to live inside this place because inside this place I feel safe. And
Mm,
I don't want to hear that I'm accountable or responsible for my own education. I don't want to like this because we are talking about, like if we were drawing bar graphs and line graphs, we'd be drawing all sorts of things at the moment in
mm,
relation to this particular subject. But I think the opportunity for change exists in the words of Mark Carney in Rupture. There's a really great moment where when we see catastrophe, if you like, or collapse, um, some people see that and become very fearful.
mm,
Others may view it as an opportune moment within which to actually grow newness and plants, like a bushfire allows renewal as well. Like there's so many different analogies that I could throw in here, but the
right.
great simplification is this, which we'll put into the show notes for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about. Nate Hagen's well worth listening to, exceptional thinker, does fantastic short grabs too for those people who feel like they just don't have a whole lot of time. Well worth listening to and learning from because he makes it very real.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that what we're experiencing is very real.
Mm,
So, um, there you are in this amazing you've got this opportune moment within what it is that you do because of your beliefs to have some level of influence in this space. Um, and we've come together and put Pollination Media together in order to actually have these conversations so that we may be able to have some communal influence, but also make welcome those people who don't necessarily
mm,
understand or have a degree in microeconomics or any of those sorts of things. So I think the thing that's interesting for me is that where we sit with private wealth and moving and where it moves and the why of where it moves is brings me to my sort of next question. What's the difference between impact washing and the real thing? How can you tell?
hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a multi-layered question as well. I mean, the
Got a few of those,
first,
sorry.
yeah, big, um, way to, cut it is, I guess, intention,
Yeah,
right? So, um, if your primary intention is for marketing, which it all, in companies, right? Like it's part of their CSRs, connected often with their marketing departments.
yeah,
I think you could do good, but uh, you may sit in, you may sit very firmly in horizon one, right?
yep,
Do good and do well, right? That is
yep.
the motto, and that, of course, is totally ripe for impact washing because uh, what is your real objective? Very easy to get swayed. Okay, so I would say that intention matters a lot. That is, even though that may not sound controversial, like in effective altruism, for instance, that movement, intention doesn't matter, right? It's just about outcomes.
Yep.
Um, I don't, I don't follow that myself, but so I think intention matters a lot because I'm going off a little bit on a tangent here, but
Go right.
uh,
Please go off. I'll follow
yeah,
you. Go.
I think part of the conversations that we have, I mean, not part, most of it is all around what we do, right? Like, oh, what is the impact investment that you're going to make? What is the change that we want to see? And
Mm.
it is very externally oriented. And it also, I mean, obviously with good intentions. I mean, myself as well. This is where, in the bio you mentioned, right? Like I'm going through an unlearning process of a lot of things and a
Me too.
re-education.
I hear you.
Um,
Same.
yeah. Um, and our focus has been really always on the outside. Oh, what good can I do? And uh, engendered in that very thought paradigm is a power differential. Like, got the
Mm.
power, and you don't even know it, right? This is where the blinders are totally on. Like, I'm going to do good. I'm going to do good. So, where can I put my money? And that's where I think effective altruism also fails. It really is not about distribution of power. It's a very singular focus of we have the power. We're going to, and so,
And in
um,
essence, it's performative, right?
what's that?
It's performative.
I mean, I do know people who follow EA who I would say, yeah, I think that's,
Oh, and
I
I
would,
wasn't referencing specifically this particular school of thought.
mm,
I'm talking about the way if we talk about intention. So if we talk
yes.
about intention and we know that intention is the driver, then that's multifaceted in and of itself, and it could be drilled down into all sorts of ways as as an individual, but then as an outcome through a company. So
Mm,
I'm just interested that if there's an opportunity to really do good, not performatively do good,
mm, yes.
which is that whole CSR marketing link that you drew earlier, I we don't need to there's no need to shout up from, as Shakespeare would say, "Thou doth protest too much, methinks." It's like we don't need to tell the whole world we're doing good,
Well, my point is actually that, um,
or do we?
if we are, my point is a slightly a different one that I'd like to make, but that's an interesting one, but which is that, um, if we are not actually open to being changed ourselves, and sometimes we're not even thinking about whether or not we're open, that question just never arises. We don't It's not a change to ourselves, it's a change to the world, the outside. But I think as I'm doing, the work that I'm doing now, I see that the change is as much about how much is the person who is doing the intervention, how much change is there as it is on the outside. This is, a relatively new thought that I'm playing with, but, like, even in the work that I do, I thought, should a KPI be not only whatever you measure in terms of the grant that you've given and how whatever outside goal that you have, but maybe also for the team itself. How much has your thinking changed? How much have you learned? How much has your mindset shifted, your heart? All of these things, I think that is actually maybe a more direct measure of how effective your change may be, because you can really know yourself. Everything else that you measure on the outside is just a proxy. Do you know what I mean? Like, you
Mm.
don't really know, you attempt to measure. But what I mean by that is that so much focus is on, what we're trying to change outside without much measurement or thought around how we change on the ourselves, the doer. And, if we
So how we change
included
so
that,
can I just qualify that? So how we change on the inside?
yeah, how we change, not how, say, the community that we have given money to, how much they have changed. Maybe they've changed on the inside as well, but I'm talking about us as the intervener. But how do we level that playing field so that actually you realize it's not even leveling a playing field? I don't actually like that term. It's,
No, no,
yeah, but how do we,
because it creates a hierarchy in conversation too, doesn't it?
yeah, well, how do we realize that actually we are as much a part of the work that needs changing, right?
So that so
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's the gift that is in the giving.
Mm.
Meaning, meaning, when you, as an individual, right? So now I understand it's not a. I'm superimposing my theory of one human being to one company. Okay, so the ability to give is a great gift back to an individual. Like it really is a great gift to be able to give something,
Yeah.
not from a position of power, but from a position of equality. I have this, I'd like to share. It's a sharing of things, which for me is much more around what that sort of donut economics and regenerative thinking is. It's reciprocity.
Yes.
And that's why it is circular. It's
Yeah.
because the human being, and yet if I look at human behavior, having studied it, and looking at external reference versus internal reference, often entrepreneurs, um, high net worth individuals are externally referenced. They're looking at how they're perceived as a
Mm.
consequence of what they do.
Mm.
Um, I know that's a broad statement. It's a bit, and maybe that's, they would argue that the case on that, but that is my observation of the people that I've met on my journey around capital investment and investors in public companies, etc. So my space has been perhaps dissimilar, very not dissimilar to yours, except that you're looking at impact, and my background has not been about impact at all, other than to the bottom line and people's return on investment. So
Mm.
for me, it's kind of an interesting conundrum because really we're dealing with very similar people, and they are high net worth individuals who have the capacity to give in that way. Um, I have a story about and I'm going off script, but I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. Um, what I've found in my journey, traveling, working, exploring, and being in very different cultures for that purpose, not just in what is a safe place for me like Australia, where I'm in a safe middle class suburb, with not a lot of concerns around money, so a certain level of entitlement, if you like. Um, is that when I've visited countries that are not as wealthy as the country that I live in, and I've been around people who have gone through all sorts of difficult times and found themselves homeless or um, in difficult circumstances. How generous those people have been to each other and to one another. For me, that has
Mm.
been truly one of the most humbling experiences to be around someone whose last plastic bag with a cup of soup and a jumper and maybe 3 or 4 cigarettes in their bag have actually because they've come from, say, a really difficult situation,
Mm.
and that's why they're homeless, to see that person hand over the cup of soup and the jumper to another younger family who had less clothes on than them to make sure that they're okay, and the joy that it brought the person who was handing that over, for me, is a really interesting sort of
Mm.
story that can embody the simplicity of what sharing really does look like. And we've decided as a human race to empower money in the way that we have.
Mm.
We've created the power structure that is money.
Yeah.
So I think for me it's interesting, and I often wonder what private capital, why private capital follows incentives. What incentivizes structures would actually move money towards regeneration. Like, what is it that takes us from this space that we're talking about into the what if, the third horizon? Is it
Mm.
is it the imagination that allows that? Is it the joy of, as you said, Tesla, which was this kind of remarkable thing that was an invention, and oh my god, what, as if we were ever going to have anything like it. Like, really, truly, I mean, in my late 50s, there was no there were what electrical cars? It's crazy. It was
Yes.
like a cartoon. So all of a sudden, the Jetsons, all of a sudden you've got this kind of car, which is innovation and exciting and it's new and it's never going to be done. So there's doubt, but there's excitement. It's like jumping to the moon, same sort of stuff. What takes us to this space? What, how do we, how do, how do you entice, connect, impart that third horizon thinking in your space?
You know, I mean, I think it comes kind of full circle to where we opened around knowing how much is enough. And I think when you mentioned that story about someone who really has nothing, but is so willing to share. I think often, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism or Hinduism, where it's a whole practice, for those who take that vow, the vow of poverty. Basically, it's like it's a vow of liberation. It's like, how do you really feel like it's like a deep trust in the world and knowing that you are enough. It really gets yeah, it gets really hairy that way. I mean, we're getting in there with the around, it's like not just economic, it's like psychological, emotional, but it is
Spiritual.
attempting to, yeah, and spiritual, attempting to really um connect with knowing that you are enough. And I think when you reach there, you are liberated and you can be much more willing, um, you're not as scared, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I think it connects also with, um, maybe our societal fear of death. A lot of these things are like a fear of something, and I think if we can, I mean, they're very valid fears, but if we can actually look at them versus trying to put them away, I think we
Yeah.
might be able to, um, just go over that hump of how do we actually make a change? Because otherwise, we will always need more, right? Even if we have enough, we will always need more.
And the irony of that is, I was talking about this morning, and I don't know why. We were talking about I don't know who I was talking to. That you can only drive one car at a time. You can only eat one meal at a time. You can only ride one bike at a time. You can only like our need for more. Our need for more. Let me reframe. We don't have a need for more. We have a want for more. Want
Mm,
and need are two very different things.
mm,
So, and I think we've misconstrued what those two things mean. I think we've sort of interlocked them so much so that we've recalibrated the meaning so as to serve our own fears, as you say.
mm,
And our fear, and there's and there's a fine line between fear and certainty, or fear and love, for want of a better expression, um, like really fine, super fine. Like you sometimes you can be standing on that line and feeling both things at the same time. And that's the complexity of the reality of the world that we're living in.
mm.
And maybe that's a philosophical conversation for another day. But it's, I think that you're right. I think that somewhere along the line, in a space that is around um, taking taking extraction and replacing it with regeneration is um, it's almost like a full circle moment where where the farmer where the farmer or where the person in a suburb, because we both come from suburbs, and the
Yes.
desire to actually grow our own vegetables. And I mean, you and I've talked about this, um, as individuals, the desire to be able to be self-sustaining and to grow your own fruit and vegetables, and know that what you're doing is actually regenerative to soil, and there's a permaculture part to that. And there's all of these really beautiful things that once upon a time were not these catch cry words or fantastic tokenistic sales marketing strategies, because it's the word, it's, it's a bit like as AI is the most popular thing in the world to be discussing at the moment. So we won't go there for today. However, if you look at this really interesting, good societal way of moving forward and move from judgment around regeneration as being idealistic, because we talked about this at the
Mm,
beginning. There's a concept in this space. Oh, you're a greenie, or
right. Yeah.
why didn't you turn up in your tie dye? You're like,
Mm,
well, because today requires a suit and I don't have a tie dye suit. Like it's a kind of a funny, it's a funny space, because when you pull back all the masking and all the layers of the human beings that we're both having to deal with, um, not having to deal with, choosing to deal with, because it's the way that we have chosen to take our careers. What's really interesting beneath all of that, stripping all of that back, we do have shared experiences. We do
yes.
have that warm
Yes.
data that combines us. We
Yes.
all, a lot of us have children. A lot of us would like that third horizon so that our children are safe moving into the future and happy and able to procreate and have a desire to even procreate and to grow our own vegetables and to, you know,
Yeah.
um, sit with love with our families and so on and so forth. And not be watching on the news that some of the islands that are very close to where we live are actually disappearing before our very eyes. Like there's a whole range of, and I think that when we strip all the crap out of it and the biases that we bring to these conversations, stripped back, we're all looking for joy
Yes.
um and
Yeah.
love and connection.
Yeah, absolutely. At that fundamental level, that shared humanity. I mean, that reminds me also of something that I try to remind myself regularly is because, like you and I are very passionate about the subject of sustainability, regeneration, um, climate change, all of these things. And um, yeah, I was in conversation with someone recently, and it was like, um, I mean, what we need more of in this world is listening, and maybe it also starts with us. And so I try to remind myself because sometimes I'm so impassioned by what I see as, like, the right way, um,
Yeah.
and the idealism, and, uh, it makes me also think of this other framework that I learned actually, it's one of the, in a Regenesis course, which is all about
Oh, yeah.
thinking, which was around meeting the field where it is. This was like one of the last lessons, right? Like you learn all of these like frameworks of how to think about systems and everything. And then near the end, it's around meeting the field where it is and like not necessarily falling into the trap, into the same paradigm of proselytizing too much. Like, let me talk and let me convince you, you know?
Which is not
And
our
so
responsibility.
yeah, but it's a push and a pull, right? Like we want to influence, but then also, are we open to being influenced? If not, it's that same dynamic that I was describing actually in philanthropy, where with good intentions, but with blinders on, you think that the only change that you need to do is in the outside with your money, with your influence, with your knowledge. And actually, I when really stop to think about it, this is not just about equality and let's make it all even, Steven. I do really believe that we have so much to learn. Like there are so many other cultures that have already gone through, I would say, apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
um, that we in Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and developed. The acronym is weird. I like, I like it.
Yeah.
Basically, that's the paradigm we live in, and actually, we're in the minority. We often are in our own bubble that we think this is the full reality, but it's not. We live in our own little bubble of the weird paradigm, and we have much to learn from people who have gone through massive disruption already. And
We
so,
are in our own Truman Show.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have the statistic right on this, but it, like, basically came to, the realization that we live in our own bubble. You know, we say things all the time where we run into someone that where we have mutual friends and we're like, "Oh, it's such a small world." It's not a small world. We just run around in small circles. And, when I think about, like, our global supply chain, our food, our,
Yep,
um
yep.
that actually still the majority of people are fed through smallholder farmers. They either feed themselves or it's through smallholder farmers. That fact, I learned that only a few years ago, and it kind of stunned me. I just thought everybody was truly beholden to the global food supply chain, and it does disrupt economies and things, but actually still most of food is not produced by these massive corporations. And I realized it's actually us. Our food is. We're reliant. But yeah. So uh it just brought into attention that sometimes when we talk about things as though they're universal, we should have a little bit of humility. Actually, it's our context.
And, and and it's interesting that you say that. I don't know what I was listening to recently, but there was, it was a podcast of some description or news or I don't know. But we were talking about um smallholder farmers and smallholder um, bakers and different types of services that are starting to sprout up in South Australia. And a lot of these people are making decisions to set up shop out the front of their houses with these kind of little cubby, like these little houses, and on a truss system where they'll bake their bread or they'll make their marmalades or they'll make their jams or they'll farm their eggs or whatever, and they put those out every morning, and people will drive past and collect their bits and pieces
Mm,
in order to a support and b have fresh and c feel part of a community, which is
mm,
quite an interesting thing that we are actually choosing to. That's a choice. That is a choice to make that decision. And I find it really interesting, particularly given that you're talking about this the weird group. Tell me what it stands for again.
oh, yeah. Western
Western,
educated, industrialized, rich, developed.
right. So this
Yeah, all the societies that fit
fantastic,
there.
brilliant. What I find really interesting, so I live in a bubble, right? I don't know much about your Singaporean bubble, but I know my bubble. And
Mm,
we call it the Bayside bubble.
mm,
Everybody's in the Bayside bubble. So when there's conversations about safety, going walking late at night or blah blah blah, some people will say, "Oh, that there's been some break-ins down in Brighton, so be careful." There's been some home entries, and then I look at it and think, maybe that's 4 or 5 people out of Bayside, and that's an entire sort of metropolitan area. But actually, we live in a socioeconomic space where every child is educated, whether it's in a public school or a private school, and the public schools are fantastic public schools. Um, everybody lives in a beautiful home. Everybody's got grounds to play on. Everybody's got a beach across the road. Not everyone's got a beach across the road. Clearly, that's not the case. Otherwise, we'd all live along in one line. But what I'm saying is, we have the ability to have this lifestyle that is so remarkable. And every day I'm grateful. Every day I'm grateful. But yes, our unconscious bias is absolutely 100% the thing. I was looking at Instagram the other day. I don't know much about filters. I'm learning about Instagram because we've got a media company now, so I've got to learn about it. And I was trying to work out how to make myself look younger. which is a theme throughout every podcast that I'm constantly talking about my wrinkly face. And anyway, but I found these glasses that you could put on, and they literally are rose colored glasses. And I
Mhm.
thought, what an interesting thing. What an interesting filter. And I know that it's a really popularized sort of statement to talk about rose colored glasses. But I actually think that is very true that we
Mm,
often will look through and everything looks peachy keen, and we set up our social media campaigns that say that we're on holiday and we look fantastic and it's great and I've got a tan and I'm happy and I'm drinking a pina colada and whatever this story is. But behind that there's a whole lot of other stuff. Which
mm,
actually could do with a bit of addressing. And as we bring that back into how our economies work, there are so many influences in this space around the moving of extraction through to regeneration, which is why we started this conversation in the first place. So, what I want to know, because I come from this place that I've just described to you, is what does the global south understand about money and community that a global north keeps getting wrong? Because I think that's the case.
well, having grown up also in the global north,
Yeah.
um, I'm not speaking from firsthand, but, my impression is that, there are so many other forms of capital. This was part of the introduction that we miss because actually in the global north, or otherwise known as the weird, Western educated, industrialized, rich, and developed countries, um, are so focused on the one form of financial capital and also doing good with that one form of capital, which is financial, that they neglect. Um, it's like a muscle. I'm so good with my right hand that I don't really use my left hand, right? It becomes weak because you don't use it. And actually, now is the time for more holistic development. We need to retrain the relational muscle because we've replaced it with you don't need deep relations or good relations with your neighbors if you can smooth it over with money. Like I don't need my neighbor because I can just outsource whatever. And
I don't need
yeah,
them and I don't want to know them.
and that has become both um I guess some ways it's efficient. You don't have to invest in something else, but it has also become our weakness. And so I would say that this is again a generalization, but that maybe the global south can teach is that there are many other forms of capital that are that will make you far more resilient. And so we've relied on the easiest thing. This is my right hand, but we've let everything else go. And it's a little bit dangerous putting everything in that one pot, especially now with the way things are economically in this world. I think that's where we need to build a lot of resilient social, invest in yourself, your health, your community relations with nature, right? All of these other forms of capital, I think we can learn a thing or two. Obviously, that's why there's like suddenly a lot of interest in indigenous ways of doing things, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Uh,
100%.
yeah, yeah. Like, what can we learn from there?
Globally.
How to steward, yeah, how to steward the earth. And it's not that it's like that is the direction, but that is definitely a strong influence that we have left behind that we need to relearn, you know? And so
And
that's
so with business, and it's an interesting exploration, I think, to take what you're talking about and that and to learn ritual and to learn reciprocity via historical ritualized First Nations um, evolutionary learnings and be willing to listen, as you've talked about. We've talked about listening today. We
Mm,
talked about how not just to listen to others, but also to listen to ourselves, like our inner selves, and
mm,
look at how those things how both of those things, which actually end up being quite circular too, by bringing in the self-knowledge and the willingness to adapt and adopt new ways of thinking and being and living, um, and taking and being willing also to, I guess, stop and simplify the complication that we've created post-industrially, because we buy this kind of sausage factory stuff, right? Because it's easier, and because we know it, and because most people do what they do because it's familiar to them, and they do it because they know it. We choose not to step outside of that because sometimes it's challenging, as we've talked about
Mm,
earlier. And because we know it, it's familiar. The familiarity gives us some level of comfort. We don't all want to be outside of our comfort zone. Not everyone wants to be
yeah.
challenged.
Yes. And
Um,
also, I think, there's a lot of loss of agency, right? In our
100%.
yeah, our current model is set up so that, um, we have domesticated ourselves. We are totally dependent on the system for our food, right? Like, I can earn a wage, but I still need to buy the food, right? And so, yeah, it's all connected, right? With even, um how this like how capitalism started centuries ago with
Yeah.
enclosure of the commons so that you could not grow your own food, and then you had to be thrown into the system in order to by proxy earn a wage to then be able to be, so we've gone into greater and greater layers of dependency, which admittedly seems kind of convenient, like you and I speaking, yeah, very convenient, but it has led to a lot of um, weakness, I guess, lack of resilience.
Yeah, and if we take it back to your analogy of, I can lift this much with my right hand,
Yeah.
and really what we're learning is that, with the metaphor, that actually what we need to do is some strength training, and the strength training is actually being able to use the right hand too, and making sure that our bones are structurally okay, and making sure our
Yeah.
muscles are fed, and making sure that our mind, body, spirit is actually in line with what it is that we believe, and that investment in self and investment in other is good for you, good for me, and good for the greater good.
Yes. No,
Which takes us
absolutely.
back to that three horizon thinking.
Well, there's also another analogy, since we're throwing in all sorts of different analogies here, that I was from a friend who, um, he was talking about this more in terms of power distribution. But
Yep,
he was like, I cannot hold this cup without my small finger's consent. Like, imagine if you broke your small finger, right? It's
yep,
like, that's
yep.
not the main thing you use, but it makes things really difficult if you don't even have if you can't use your whole hand. And so
Yes.
I thought that was a beautiful analogy in terms of like, um, how do you bring everybody along, right? And you need the consent of everybody. You don't just use the dominant one to decide if the whatever the weaker ones decide to withhold consent, you are in a lot of trouble. Um,
And like any organization that is run from the top down, if you like, in a very traditional hierarchical structure, companies that are thriving, where people feel wonderful as part of that culture, and they have input into that culture, and they have the ownership and agency of what it is that they're doing and how they contribute to the whole in that regenerative way, thrive, versus dragging people kicking and screaming to the CEO's, this is the plan. This is, here we're going. This is what we're doing. What if there's, as you say, the masses underneath saying, I don't actually buy that, then you're in strife
yeah,
because you can't make a change. Okay, so this is my this is a tricky question, because I think it's probably one of the most important questions that we will address today. Um, I want to know what gives you hope. What are you seeing shift that most people have not yet noticed?
I wish I'd prepared for this question because I tend to be kind of a pessimistic person.
And it's one of the things that I love about you, but I know that you can do this right off the cuff. I'm happy to sit with you quietly whilst you pontificate.
What gives me hope?
Yeah, what are you seeing? What is it that you see in what you're doing? Or otherwise, it may not necessarily be where you're interfacing with people who are making impact or helping to facilitate that impact. It may not be that. It could be just what you, Syndico, is looking at and feeling. And I'm interested in what you think, feel, see.
Yeah, I mean, I have a two-pronged answer. I mean, one is, I'm working now, with a family that is, uh, working to deaccumulate, and it is a very rare I mean, I wanna say a rare opportunity. You don't find a lot of people, um, who have this kind of mindset, but it does give me hope, um, and it's incredibly aspirational, and along with doing this kind of work, I guess it's an openness to failing, right? Like, you the results will be something that, if they're good, you may not see in your lifetime, and if they're bad, you may, put money in this organization that closes down, but even then, the belief is, like, you will have still made some good change in the people. Again, this is not just about the outcomes, this is the people and the process that will remain, and so that gives me a lot of hope because my job is, um my day-to-day role is one of hope, right? We are working on seeding the third horizon, um, and there's a lot of trepidation, and then when we come into there is kind of like an investment committee, we don't call it that, but, um, we fall back off very often into Horizon 1 talking like, "Well, do we wanna invest in this because, the cash flow looks really bad," and then it's like, you need to have some of that conversation, but, at the end of the day, it's still moored around, "Is this a model we wanna support?"
Yeah,
Even if we think the business is I don't know, it's kind of a gamble, like, will it survive? They're not always businesses, they're actually mostly, organizations, but anyway, yeah, my job is steeped in hope. Um, I guess when my initial reaction was around how, when you said that, what I feel often is I desire not only to do a lot of change, but like I said, to be the change, and I see that I am just the same. All the work that I do, no, really. At the core, I'm just the same,
yeah,
and then
you're
there's a
harsh on yourself. You're harsh on yourself.
well,
You know you're harsh on yourself.
um, and then there's just a level of, okay, well, is this part of my work around self-acceptance? Okay,
Yeah,
you know? Um,
yeah,
yeah, like practicing nonviolent communication. I'm like, "Wow, years of practice, and still my
yeah.
communication is often violent."
I promise you that I would find that quite challenging 100%. You know me well enough to know that. I would say to you that I guess in rounding this conversation up, I would like to say thank you for your honest, open, always interesting conversation. So thank you. I'm so lucky that I had you as my buddy, and I'm thrilled that now other people will hear you speak. So I think that's wonderful. I want to wish you all of the best in using your skills for good, toward good, i- in the adventures that take you towards the third horizon. I
Mm,
think that the leap of faith that is required for us is paramount and um, and wonderfully enticing. And terrifying all at once. So the complexity of the feelings in and of themselves is full on. But I also think that when I was talking to you earlier about the gift being in the giving, I think that the gift for you or for me, or for anybody who is working in a place of sharing and change and opportunity in that space, is always gifted a gift. The
Mm,
gift is around the acceptance of the self and the and the maybe repositioning of the ego a little bit,
mm.
and maybe not giving so much airtime to the self doubt and the self loathing and the judgment of the self that can be the voice that stops hope in its tracks. So for you to say that it's a lifelong journey, I think, what we're on. We have our own horizons as well, personal horizons
Yes,
in that space.
absolutely.
And the bridge for us the bridge that we're also helping to build
Yeah.
would not, in the words of Fred Rags, would not actually be able to exist without tension. So if we talk purely from an architectural perspective, what we're doing is we are walking across a bridge towards something that I think is for our greater good. And what could be better than that experience, my friend Cindy Coe?
Beautifully said. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you to you. And what a genuinely beautiful conversation that we've had.